From the United Nations Office to the African Union, this is She Stands for Peace, a podcast series where I explore the state of the women, peace, and security agenda in Africa through a series of conversations with key actors. In the podcast, we ask the central question: 20 years after UNSCR 1325, how far have we come? I am Dr. Yemisi Akimbobola, your host, and today I'm joined by Hajia Raheemat Momodu, Head of the Human Security and Civil Society Division at the Economic Community of West African States, also known as ECOWAS, the regional union of the 15 countries in West Africa. Hajia Raheemat Momodu joins me from Abuja, Nigeria, and we have a conversation about turning regional policies, commitments, and action plans into reality. So, Hajia Raheemat Momodu, thank you so much for speaking to me today. You went from a degree in geography and regional planning from the University of Jos into 9 years of journalism practice before you started your journey in gender and development and then peace and security. And you are well published, you're a poet, and you describe yourself as a committed Pan African. So tell us about your career journey towards where you are now as head of human security and civil society at ECOWAS.
Yes, thank you very much. I think you have summarized it very well. I started off in geography, cartography. I had my first master's in cartography and remote sensing. And as a child, I was quite passionate about drawing maps. I was reading Atlas, which was uncommon for a young person to be reading Atlas. I was fascinated by those lines that ultimately made sense. And my dream then was to map Nigeria. But of course, I couldn't get a job after I finished my first master's to do that. But because I had always liked writing, that was how I got into journalism, as a features writer. And I had a very good, time as a journalist. And when I applied for the British government Chevening scholarship, I had applied to read a master's in journalism and development. But it was during the interview that they said, "Look, Rahimat, from what we have heard of you, from what you're saying now, I think it's better you go for a gender and development course." And that was how my life was changed. And so when I returned, it was almost natural for me to go into development work. And I started work as a program manager with USAID Office of Transition Initiative, because that was when we were still transiting. And then from there, I moved on to Frederick Ebert Foundation, the German foundation, as their first gender equity project officer. And then from Frederick Ebert Foundation, I moved on to European delegation to Nigeria as a program manager in charge of human rights and good governance. I spent 2 years there, and then I moved on to UNFPA. I was their first national program officer in charge of gender, and also at a point I was in charge of youth development programs in UNFPA office in Nigeria. And of course, in 2008, I joined ECOWAS Commission. And for the first 10 years, between 2008 to mid 2018, I was the first ECOWAS representative at the African Union. So that, in a nutshell, is how I moved from purely trying to be a cartographer to being a development worker, and now you can call me a diplomat.
Yeah, you're a woman of many skills. And like I said earlier on, you're well published. And in one of your publications, you wrote that it has become imperative for Africa to answer the question: what is the value of protecting national sovereignty with poor economies, conflict ridden societies, and weak global influence? Africa must face the stark reality that African integration is the fastest and surest pathway to building strong national economies. End quote. So that was a quote from one of your publications. So when we think broadly in terms of the work that you've done so far, within ECOWAS and in other contexts, and we also have other frameworks for integrations like the African Continental Free Trade Area. When we consider all of these opportunities for integration and cross pan-African interactions in the context of WPS agenda and things like the Silencing the Guns campaign, policies around disarmament, and other policy objectives. How has existing mechanisms for African integration contributed to achieving peace and security on the continent?
I think for me, it's very obvious. As we speak now, African Union and the regs are well known globally. In fact, Africa as a region seems to be the most united among the regions in the world. In terms of when you talk about peace and security, you call the UN, you are calling the African Union next, especially when it comes to peace and security on the African continent. The fact that the AU and the REX are so well known and acknowledged as being very active stakeholders in the area of peace and security, especially on the African continent, is the demonstration that all the efforts, especially starting from when OAU became AU, when there were now change of paradigm, there were change of mindset in terms of how Africa should at least be part of finding solution to its insecurity. And that has paid off with the establishment of a mechanism like the AU Peace and Security Council, a mechanism like the African Peace and Security Architecture. Yes, I agree that if you look at the Abuja Treaty, which is protocol on the African Economic Community, we have not followed through step by step what was written in that treaty. So I've always canvassed that we need to go back to that treaty and take it step by step. I often tell people, no matter how strong Iraq is, like ECOWAS, for the sake of African unity and development, AU needs to be equally strong. So yes, a lot has been done. I don't want to start to repeat what ECOWAS has done in the area of peace and security. The records are there. Nobody interfaces or responds in any issue of insecurity in the region faster than ECOWAS and more robustly, and of course using our own resources. The latest example is in Mali. You can see how ECOWAS acted swiftly. We are still accompanying the Mali process. In spite of these gaps in terms of coordination between the REX and the AU, but there's nobody in doubt of the fact that the AU is better equipped, is more capable, and more importantly, more willing to interfere in issues of insecurity on the continent. In addition to that, under the AU reform, in fact, its peace and security issues was one of the reasons that led to the ongoing or just concluded, I think it's still ongoing, AU reform. And one of those reforms was reactivating the AU Peace Fund. And I understand there's so much money now in the AU Peace Fund. I'm not saying it's enough to do a peacekeeping, but at least there's more money in the AU Peace Fund, which also demonstrate that the African leaders are beginning to put their money where their mouth is in terms of acting proactively and collectively to address issues of insecurity.
So you've painted a positive picture of the trajectory that the continent integrated with itself, the moves it has made, and the positive kind of developments in terms of its commitment to peace and security. In your years of experience and looking more broadly at these areas of work, what do you identify as a gap that needs to be really at the top of the agenda?
For me, the fundamental gap has always been that in recognition of the fact that the RECs were established independently and so they are independent bodies from the AU, there is a need for an institutionalized coordination mechanism, especially at the level of decision making. Since 2007, when the regional economic communities deployed representative to the AU. Initially, those liaison officers, the REX representative to the AU, were mainly in the area of peace and security. But in January 2018, the chief executive of REX and the chairperson of the AU decided that it would be a waste of resources to have people at that level come from the REX to the AU and they deal with only peace and security. So the mandate of those offices were expanded to all areas of integration. But primarily, the peace and security agenda remain very, very strong. So since 2007 till date, there has been institutional presence of REX at the AU, and that covers the area of operational or technical relationship. So we should have a situation where at any point in time, Africa is able to speak with one voice, because that voice would have been discussed at the regional level, agreed on, feed into the the continental level, and then the AU feed into the UN level. That way, we won't have too much of discrepancies. So to me, that's a major gap that will really help us, and that is also in the spirit of the Abuja Treaty, the Protocol on Africa Economic Community. That the rest should be the building blocks. The rest should, on their own, be very strong and united and coordinated, and then that now supports the bigger continental body. So that's one of my greatest gap, and I think is something that we should ultimately move towards. Why don't we have mini summits at the region, and then we have representative heads of state of the REX now come to the AU level, and then coordinate and harmonize positions. Then coming down specifically to the peace and security agenda. Things have really improved from when I was in Addis, when I came to Addis in 2008. There used to be a time as a representative of REC. In spite of that being one of my main mandate, I was not allowed into the open session of the AU Peace and Security Council. We had to fight for that.
And I want to focus a little bit more specifically on ECOWAS and the structures that it has for women, peace, and security. So, ECOWAS has its own conflict prevention framework as part of its action plan in the West African region. And the framework, I believe, has about 14 components, amongst which is women, peace, and security. And ultimately, the framework functions as a reference for member states in their efforts to strengthen human security in the West Africa region. So tell us more about that framework.
Yeah, the ECOWAS conflict prevention framework. In fact, we just returned from Accra. We had a meeting with UNOAS and UN, I think, in New York. They call it DPPA in New York last week from Accra, talking about this conflict prevention framework. For me, it was a pace setter. It was adopted in 2008. For the first time, peace and security was seen in a broader prism beyond the narrow definition of peace and security. The conflict prevention framework is anchored on the human security mentality of peace and security. So that's why we have 14 components, including natural resource governance, youth development, other areas that, of course, fit into peace and security. It is currently being evaluated. Its implementation is being assessed. We discussed a lot about it last week, and a secretariat was created some years back, and that secretariat has been doing a good job in terms of implementing some of the components. Every component has its action plan, including women, peace, and security. So that women, peace, and security, as part of the 14 component, is also currently being assessed. But in addition to that framework, especially when it comes to women, peace, and security, ECOWAS has the regional action plan on the implementation of 1325, which we are currently about to evaluate to see how far we have gone after 20 years. We had a commemoration reflection on ECOWAS implementation of 1325 last year with the UNOAU. They funded that online intervention. And so when it comes to women, peace, and security, we have the conflict prevention, we have the regional action plan that we are both reassessing or evaluating. In terms of structures within ECOWAS, we have the newly created Women, Peace, and Security unit, which is under my division of Human Security and Civil Society Engagement. We also have the ECOWAS Gender and Development Center in Dakar, also working in the area of women, peace, and security. The Gender Center has, for example, facilitated the creation of two network of female peace builder, women that are working in the area of peace and security. Equally, my division under the Women, Peace and Security are working very closely in collaboration with the Departments of Political Affairs, Peace and Security. We launched the FemWise West Africa. I'm sure you know about the FemWise, which is the continental body for women peace builders and mediators. In fact, I think we still remain the only REC that has launched its FemWise. We are the only region with a FemWise West Africa, and we are in the process of institutionalizing that body as a subsidiary of our own Council of the Wise. So in addition to all that, we also have, it was established, 2017, and if I remember correctly, a Women, Peace and Security Advisory Committee within the Department of Political Affairs, Peace and Security. It is not a statutory body like my unit. It is an advisory body that is focused on mainstreaming women, peace and security or gender in all ECOWAS political processes and peace and security. For me, this is a best practice. Other regions, I think, are interested in setting up such an advisory committee within the department that is responsible for peace and security. So that makes it very easy to build capacity with that department with support from those of us like my Women, Peace and Security unit and the Gender Center with the gender expertise, technical expertise. We support political affairs to mainstream gender. And that has already started with the training of our military personnel in peace support operations. I know that has been done for ECOMIG, the ECOWAS mission that is based in the Gambia, for example. So these are some of the issues surrounding ECOWAS work and efforts in women, peace and security beyond the very, very transformative ECOWAS conflict prevention framework that has guided our work and broadened the understanding of peace and security to mean, ensuring human security in general.
Now, let's talk about implementation and monitoring. So, there are 6 benchmarks for assessing the progress of the framework's objective for women, peace, and security. So, among this is greater visibility for WPS activities, implementation of measures to prosecute sexual violence, narrowing the education gap between boys and girls, and so on. So, there's more benchmarks beyond these three. In practice, and particularly at national and regional levels, what has been the learning from implementing the conflict prevention frameworks and other such kind of policies and frameworks at ECOWAS as far as WPS action plans go?
One of the things that we have learned is that, yes, we have the structures, we have the mechanisms, and we have the text. I think ECOWAS has the highest record of member states in AU on the continent that have developed national action plans on 1325. I think 13 or 14 of our member states have done that a long time ago. In fact, some are in their second and third generation. And then in the case of Nigeria, for example, Nigeria has even gone deeper. In Nigeria, some states have state action plans, and I hear a few local governments are coming. So you can see in terms of text, in terms of the drive, ECOWAS has really succeeded, working with other partners, of course, to entrench that sense of developing action plans. What we have discovered is that, yes, after developing these action plans, they are not well resourced for implementation. So that's one gap. Member states are not providing the resources to implement these action plans and state action plan in the case of Nigeria. So that too has been very frustrating. And of course, with member states, they will tell you budgetary allocation, there is no money, there is no money. So when they prioritize, unfortunately, it doesn't appear that women, peace and security is high on the agenda in terms of prioritization. So that we have learned. And this also leads to the fact that it becomes very difficult for monitoring. to get reports from member states. And that is why currently ECOWAS is working under a project called EPSAL, contextualize the Continental Resort Framework. I'm sure you are aware of the Continental Results Framework that was developed by the AU, by the Office of the Special Envoy on Women, I think, yeah, Special Envoy Women, Peace and Security, Madam Diop. So ECOWAS is in the process of domesticating that Continental Results Framework to allow us to do proper monitoring. It is through monitoring you can identify gaps and you'll be able to, re-strategize on how to close those gaps. So in terms of reporting, in terms of resourcing, in terms of implementation, we have done well in text, we have done well in adopting the right documents, but they're not well resourced, so implementation is poor, and of course, monitoring, and that's where ECOWAS comes in. We believe that with stronger monitoring, we'll be able to push member states in the right direction in terms of resourcing. Another lessons learned is the fact that we are not doing very well in the area of supporting community peace builders, especially women peace builders. You give example with the Northeast Nigeria where you have the Boko Haram. Every day you get the report that the people that are really keeping a semblance of community living in that part of the world or in similar cases are the women at the community level. Even those in the IDP camps, they are the ones who are really working, trying to, how will I call it, repair broken societal bonds, social cohesion. They are the ones still looking around to get food. They are the ones who are, basically are building the society. But yet, as ECOWAS, as member states, we are not able to reach and support these women directly. You still have a situation where big NGOs or big international NGOs are the ones who are in these places, collect big money, and by the time they do their institutional deals, administrative costs, pay salaries to workers, whatever support they give directly to these women peace builders is next to nothing. So for us, that's another area that we see, we reflected on, and we believe that is something that we don't know how it will go, because donors will always be talking about financial accountability, institutional, this, that, but we must find a very innovative way to support these peace builders, women and men directly, who are on ground, who are the one that, in my view, are really the peace builders. Not most of them are not even involved in the mediation process. The system in such a way keeps them out of especially track one and track two mediation processes. And that's one of the reasons FemWise was established. We are hoping to use FemWise West Africa as soon as it's institutionalized in ECOWAS and we begin to build, establish the national offices. Those national offices will be able to connect ECOWAS to these women peace builders that are working at the level of the community, so that we can promote the involvement of women in community peace architecture, community peace infrastructure, which is not the case currently. There are few women who are involved at that level, especially from early warning to mediation to proper peace building. So ECOWAS is also working at establishing what we call the ECOWAS Regional Women Peace and Security Steering Group. We're about to start a mapping of stakeholders so that we can establish this group that will help us to coordinate better, and as ECOWAS to provide that convening role so that all actors working in women, peace and security, we can sit down from time to time and say, look, this is the gap. How do we address it collectively? You do this, you do that. And then we're able to monitor progress, which we are not doing very well right now.
Now, I want us to expand more in terms of governmental and intra-governmental relations with civil society. You've spoken there about, the role women organizations and women peace builders play in the WPS agenda. And I know that ECOWAS has a long-standing relationship with many such women organizations like the West Africa Network for Peace Building, WANEP. for example. What do you think has been missing in member states' consideration of the role and ways in which civil society can help them achieve the things that the government themselves have been less successful in achieving?
We all know that prevention is better than cure. And how do you prevent? You prevent by doing the right thing from the beginning. There is no amount of firefighting that will resolve a conflict or a crisis. You still have to go back to address the root causes or what is called structural issues. ECOWAS has done structural assessments, this structural vulnerability assessment for all member states. They know what these issues are, what these structural issues are, and most of them border on governance deficit, widening insecurity, poverty, corruption, and of course the youth bulge and our inability to manage the youth bulge with our high unemployment. Yet, when ECOWAS and the UN are called to intervene, you intervene almost pretending that these things don't exist. And that's one of the reasons why I am recommending that there is a need for ECOWAS to sit with its member states, have a frank discussion to say, look, insecurity will not go away as long as there's governance deficit. And who are your greatest ally and partner in terms of addressing insecurity, if not the civil society? By not engaging with your citizen in a very constructive way, it is not in a very, how will I call it, demeaning way. It's not engaging them. You are actually undermining yourself as a government, as a state. There is no how ECOWAS can enter each member state and begin to overtake the role of the national government. All we can do is to point the national government in the right direction, harmonize, share experiences. Where we see best practices, we say, oh, this is working well in Nigeria, this one is working well in Cote d'Ivoire. As you know, in terms of, especially in the area of peace and security, ECOWAS is partnering very well with WANEP. So I think ECOWAS is a model to the rest of the world, a model in terms of how you interface with civil society organization. Then ECOWAS is also very, very good at sectorial civil society engagement. So what you have in ECOWAS, for example, WANEP in the area of peace and security, you have in trade, ECOWAS Trade Civil Society Network, you have in another department. So almost every department and directorate has its own civil society interface. So that's why what I'm trying to do now is to develop what I call an ECOWAS-wide non-state actor or civil society engagement strategy. We are at an advanced, in fact, actually we have a draft strategy, waiting for further inputs before validation so that we institutionalize an ECOWAS-wide interface with civil society. In fact, we are hoping that we already have the establishment of an ECOSOC in our revised treaty. So we are hoping that eventually we are going to reactivate that process of establishing an ECOSOC, which will firmly put civil society at the center of everything ECOWAS does. Now we have very good relationships sectorially, like I told you, but we want to improve it. As I'm speaking to you now, there are two separate regional civil society meetings that are being held on this subject. The civil society said we should give them time to go and reflect on the nature, on the scope and content of our relationship with ECOWAS that will inform that strategy that I'm talking about.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Hajia Raheemat Momodu. It's been really great and insightful listening to you. Now, to finish off the interview, we've talked about your work and your professional background. Tell us an interesting fact about you that people wouldn't find on Google.
Fun fact is that I am a TV addict. I watch TV a lot, and I'm unapologetically a Nollywood movie addict. And then I like to dance. So I think those are the fun
Fantastic.
facts. I like throwing small parties and having an excuse to dance.
I think we all need an excuse to dance, especially in
Yes.
today's world right now. Thank you so much, Hajia. It's been a pleasure speaking with you. You have been listening to She Stands for Peace, the podcast series that explores the state of the women, peace, and security agenda in Africa, asking the central question 20 years after UNSCR 1325, how far have we come? I'm Dr. Yemisi Akimbobola, your host, and this podcast was produced by the United Nations Office to the African Union with the generous support of the Norwegian Ministry of Foreign Affairs.